Hello and welcome to Trigonometry. I'm Francis Foster.
I'm Konstantin Kisin.
And this is a show for you if you want honest conversations with fascinating people.
Our brilliant guest today is a writer, cultural commentator. She's the host of the Subversive podcast. Alex Kaschuta, welcome to Trigonometry.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a great pleasure to have you on the show. We've been meaning to get you on for a long time. Tell us who you are, first of all, because you've got an interesting story, which I think informs a lot of the views that you have as well, which we're going to get to. So tell everybody, who are you? How are you where you are? What has been the journey that leads you through life to be here talking to us?
Oh, yeah, a very long story, which involves escape from the clutches of Eastern Europe, living in the West for about probably 12 years in total, and now back in the last year, living in the Corona bunker in my hometown in Transylvania. So it's been a journey, I have to say, but that's not the only thing. I mean, I've been a journalist. I've worked in tech. Now I work in finance related to tech. It's quite many things have happened in the last 12 years, and now, like you said, they've informed my view on a lot of things.
Well, an interesting piece of your journey is you were part of, I imagine, the sort of brain drain from Eastern Europe, people who are young, bright, well-educated, etc., going over to the West. And you get here, you lived in London for 5 years, you get a job, you have a good job, you live in London, and increasingly you find that the sort of promise of everything that the West offers, particularly the way that it's sort of configured at the moment, is not fulfilling your actual needs and wishes, and it's increasingly making you feel lonely and unhappy.
Yes, I think that's kind of the pattern that I saw in myself first and foremost, but also in a lot of people around me. There was this prescribed ladder that one must climb up. You know, first you get to the West, phew, you made it. Maybe you go to school there. That's also the next step, and then you climb your way through, you know, whichever corporate ladder you find is closest to you or most accessible. The issue that I found was that it's quite an absorbing life, especially if you might have other plans. As a woman with a female life trajectory, I wanted family and children to be part of that. And it became a bit complex to do that in London. And it seemed to me that, you know, the ladder that was in front of me in terms of career was a little bit at odds with the ladder that I wanted. Because, you know, you can climb up and you get more responsibility, and you know that becomes the major focus point of your life. And, you know, that's what you're paid for. That's what it should be. That's what you're responsible for. But in parallel to that, you know, I wanted to just have a more flexible existence. And that's why I moved back home. And now I work remotely, which is, you know, quite a blessing. And I'm grateful to be able to do that.
And Alex, do you think a lot of women feel the same way as you do in the West, but they can't express this feeling that you have?
I think a lot of them are they struggle with dating. They struggle with, figuring out things in time, because, you know, men and women typically have different kind of biological timelines that they have to deal with, which is something that it's not that, you know, isn't really spoken about very clearly in the mainstream. I can understand why people are trying to encourage women to, you know, be independent and climb these ladders that are supposedly so extremely amazing that everyone needs to be on them. And I think that the issue is that a lot of them wake up a little bit maybe late, and it's a bit complicated to make your bed when you're, let's say, 37, and then you think, oh, should I freeze my eggs? And I'm like, oh, maybe it's a bit late for that, to be honest. It's a complicated thing. And my issue was that, you know, people didn't really prepare me or my friends or anyone for these decisions or these forks in the road that you have to eventually confront if you're a woman, and if your plan isn't just to, you know, dedicate your whole existence to McKinsey or whoever, you know, wants to pay you lots of money.
And Alex, why do you think it is that we don't talk about this? Why is this a taboo subject? Because the reality is, it's a biological fact. If you want kids, the best time to do it is the earlier the better, really. Past the age of 20, whenever it is. Why are we not talking about it?
I think there's kind of an egalitarian assumption at the core of our societies, especially in the West, that if you want it, you can have it. You can have it all. You want to increase your optionality. You want to be equal in status to men, obviously. And the main source of status that exists now in the West are these hierarchies, the corporate hierarchy or academia or wherever. It's a place that will take more than 9 to 5 to invest in if you want the status. In more traditional societies, older women had status through other means. They were, the proverbial wise crone that gave advice or some form of matriarch or something. We don't have those levels anymore. You have Fortune 500, or pick your industry, or you have nothing, or your consumption options diminish if you don't make enough money to consume or continue, going on trips or getting other status objects that are important. And I think that's a major tension.
And so you say that that's a major tension, but ultimately, by women not fulfilling this sort of, let's be fair, like a biological urge, surely they're denying, number one, a part of themselves, but number two, making themselves miserable in the long term.
Yeah, I think for humans, it's hard to tell what's going to make you happy in the long term and what's going to make you miserable. And when you're, for example, if you're a young professional in the big city, the whole city is constructed around single life. It's constructed around optimizing your options, for consuming cool stuff, going to cool places, mingling with cool people, which are coincidentally all single. That's the lifestyle it's built around. And if you want to opt out, because essentially that's what you're doing by having a child, you kind of have to accept that you're nuking this lifestyle. And you're moving on to a lifestyle that is, involves other people, has some constraints. You reduce your optionality by having children. And I can understand why some people either postpone this decision for a long time until they get into hot water for biological reasons, or they just don't want to do it at all. And then maybe they make up reasons like, I don't know, the polar ice caps are melting or something. So yeah, there are different reasons, but the reasons to have children are not as many as they used to be.
And one of the things I think is a core of the work that you do, your writing, your commentary, etc., is exploring the sort of constraints that human beings place on themselves and almost need sometimes in order to live a happy and fulfilled life. And I find that very interesting watching some of the other interviews that you've done. There's a sort of inbuilt assumption that no one in a liberal quote-unquote society questions, which is the more free you are to be an atomized individual who's free to do whatever they want, the better. And it is automatically assumed that anything that constrains you, anything that shapes your behavior, anything that encourages or pushes you in any direction that is counter to that is automatically wrong, bad, evil, part of the patriarchy in this case, or whatever else it might be. So give us your thoughts on that sort of struggle between freedom and the constraints that sometimes human beings actually benefit from.
Yeah, I think this conception of freedom, this kind of rational, liberated individual that we've instantiated in our flavor of liberalism is quite new historically. Because if you look back at, for example, how Aristotle conceptualized freedom, it was essentially in a way of freedom from the base desires. It was kind of self-control, being kind of cultivating oneself to the point where you become a master of yourself. That conception of freedom we haven't cultivated at all. Freedom at the moment is freedom from, constraint, freedom from tradition, freedom from any sort of conventional knowledge that, might have helped our ancestors coordinate or, build a robust society or, just at least understand what's going on in each other's heads. And now I think we're at the point where a lot of the freedom that people ask for is freedom from the body. I think you see this a lot with, kind of these transhumanists, transgenderism. It's the idea that, not only am I not constrained by tradition, I'm not even constrained by, the chains of physical existence. I'm, this is but a skin that I can change like in a video game because, there's not really any reason for it not to be interchangeable. Like, why would you constrain my freedom? Live and let live, don't tread on me. That's it. I think that's quite a limited thing because there is wisdom in a lot of these traditions. There is a lot of coordination value. There is value in me understanding what you think and what your moral standards are and what you what I might be able to expect from you when we're in society together. That's something that we don't really put that much value on anymore. But I think it's something that goes out the window. And I think with this concept of freedom, where it's just like leave me alone. It's also an impoverishment. Like, for example, if you're an 18-year-old girl and you don't get, traditional instruction in life, you go on the internet, find the easiest source of money, which is probably either, going on seeking arrangement or OnlyFans or something like that. You fulfill your expedient needs to get some money to, I don't know, buy purses or whatever is interesting to you at 18. And these things might have long-term consequences. The idea that because you're 18, you're now a sovereign individual ready to make choices. You're, the rational human going out and, kicking ass and taking names. I don't know if that's the case. So for
Alex,
me,
you touched on something which I think is very important there. And I'm increasingly aware that this conversation might sound like three people from the 1950s having a conversation about morality.
Good.
But I do actually think this is important because one of the things you touch on there when you talk about freedom, and particularly this OnlyFans, whatever arrangement, is the freedom to do whatever you want in the sexual realm has sort of clashed, I would say, with the fact that sex has consequences beyond just, the immediate experience. We've sort of lost touch with that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think people try to mitigate the fact that sex has consequences through the norm of consent, which is now the big cudgel that comes in, and we try to solve everything with consent. And if you had bad sex, it must have been the consent was wrong. You didn't really give consent. The idea, the problem with sex is that it is very complicated, and it's something that happens beneath the rational level. There's a lot of negotiation that's, ties into, I don't know, body language, pheromones, implicit cultural assumptions about what's to be expected or not, things that really don't work at the level of a contract. And we've tried to just, force everything into this contractual mold. And it's not surprising to me that young people are confused about sexual norms, and that, for example, maybe young women really are having a bad time, because there's a lot of chat about Me Too and how all of these cases are ridiculous. Like, the Aziz Ansari case where there was this ambiguous event that, it definitely wasn't rape, but it was kind of shoehorned into the non-consensual rape mold after the fact. But it was clearly a lot of miscommunication in an area that is fraught with, it's a dangerous thing to have sex, especially as a woman. Historically, you were burdened with children. There was also kind of the shame overhang, which people used to use to kind of control these situations. So I understand why it's confusing, and we're lacking a language to deal with these things, because it's like trying to write poetry in binary code. It's pretty hard to understand. If this is your only tool that you have in your toolbox, consent. Okay, I think we need to get a bit more nuanced about sex.
And you say we need to get a bit more nuanced about sex. Isn't part of the problem that we now treat sex as we would treat a sort of an experience? We use it as a way to say, oh, I've done this position, I've had this, and actually what you're getting away from what the act was originally intended for, and also really denying the bonding element of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think because we're so used to having, consumption be our main way of interacting with the world, we've reduced this act into the platform of consumption. I think probably porn culture has something to do with it, because sex is a consumer product. After all, it's all everywhere. I mean, the first time I got on the internet, I was probably 13 years old. That was a relatively long time ago. I found porn in 20 minutes. So I'm sure it's quite accessible to everyone, and everyone's a bit oversaturated with it. And yeah, it is a product at this point. So I think, with dating apps, we've moved into another realm where people are very much kind of tokenized and then commoditized. Transforming these experiences into simply, notches or checklist boxes is not surprising if that's kind of the angle that we've taken. And that we always have this kind of market filter between us and the other person, with social media as well. Like, you're always kind of have this layer of technology intermediating the connection between you and someone else. And the algorithm knows, which one's your best picture. It knows, how to present you in the best way, so that you increase your consumption options with the other people on the platform. I think this really does skew people in how they think about their own sexuality, and how they think about how they should be relating to other people. These things have become the norm quite fast. Like, it's been surprising to me to see how fast dating apps have become normative. And a lot of people. I've met my husband on a dating app, and I think it can be a great technology if you use it judiciously and treat it the way it is. But I can also see that it warps the dating landscape quite heavily in many ways, because this is not natural. This is not how people interact. It really is terrible for funny people. It's not the best place to meet funny people.
That's okay. Neither of us is funny.
But
just proved it there. I did a little joke. She didn't laugh.
Yeah,
no.
just absolutely
confirmation. Lol.
I'm not crazy about the self-deprecating humor. You guys are obviously funny, and yeah. Sorry.
Good. Excellent. That's the kind of response we want. But Alex, listen, we're obviously just joking around, but I find so much of what you're saying really interesting and refreshing. And let me ask you this, because I guess historically, this whole thing, I'm sure part of it is driven by technology, but part of it is also driven by a rebellion against overprescribed, hyper-constraining social norms. Girls don't do this, boys, don't behave like that. This is how we're all supposed to be. Is it sort of like the jumper was a bit too warm, so we've started picking away at the threads, and now the whole thing is just falling apart?
Yeah, I think that's a component as well, because humanity and how people evolved was always under some form of constraint. Like, people keep complaining about the fact that women have hypergamous instincts, and
what does that mean for people who are not familiar?
Yeah, it's the idea that women, in the worst of cases, it's framed as women being gold diggers, but it's the idea that women tend to be attracted to men who are competent, have resources, aka money, and have kind of status signals, show power. They're high status men, and they kind of tend to date up as much as they can across these hierarchies to get someone who can secure those resources for herself, but mostly the framing is that it's for her offspring, and that increases chances for survival. That's kind of the Evo Psych explanation for it. So the idea that you have hypergamy, but hypergamy evolved under conditions where women were quite restricted in what they could do sexually. I mean, there are very few societies ever in the history of man where there wasn't some form of kind of like patriarchy or matriarchy that controlled the sexuality of young girls in some ways. And essentially these things co-evolved. You have these controls that are social controls on sexuality, like, okay, who are you going to marry? We need to make sure that you're a virgin before, these are quite restrictive ways to deal with sexuality. And then you have these kind of hypergamous instincts, or, instincts for women to seek out dating, these top status guys. And the problem is, once you lift all sexual controls, you lift the lid of patriarchy, you essentially have this very strong urge that women have to date only the apex guys, which now manifests in essentially what we see on dating apps, where, you know, a very small fraction of men get to go on all the dates. So women are very, very picky. But back in the day when, you know, you had patriarchy, or, you know, insert your control mechanism of choice, controlling who girls got to marry, you know, forming alliances, using kind of gearing a female sexuality in different directions. You know, this instinct existed, but it didn't get to go buck wild. So it's interesting to think about, you know, why it's happening. Obviously, it's an increase in freedom, but it's also very destabilizing in terms of, you know, marriage rates, in terms of people, you know, actually getting to have offspring, who gets married. There's, you know, it's definitely a very novel in the history of humanity overall. Obviously, I'm sure there are some tribes in the Amazon, people can, you know, come in and say, oh, no, they had a strange, you know, super sexual matriarchy, but it's a fraction of 1% of civilizations. Most had some form of control.
Hey, Konstantin, do you love trigonometry?
Of course, incredible interviews, hilarious live streams, hard-hitting satire, plus my handsome jawline.
Whatever takes away from your hairline. But if you do love trigonometry and you want to support us, there's only one place to do that, and that's on Locals.
Yes, Locals is a brilliant platform that has been incredibly supportive to our show and other problematic creators.
The great thing about Locals is that it's a community for people who love trigonometry.
That's right, it's a place for you to hang out with like-minded people, share thoughts, memes, and discuss the show.
You can enjoy it for free, but it also gives you the option of supporting us for as little as $7 a month.
And if you want to give more, you can. We have incredible rewards for our higher tier supporters as well.
We've got everything from mugs, monthly group calls, and 1-on-2 chats with me and KK.
Get in. Join our community by hitting the link in the description and the pinned comment below.
See you there, guys. And Alex, we're talking about this and saying, you know, that women have greater choice than ever before, and women. But in many ways, this society and this culture, it's more geared and designed for men than it is for women, because men have abundance of choice. They don't have to commit. You have access to an app which can present you with literally thousands of options. Why do you have to commit to one woman?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's they call this the apex fallacy. You know, people say, oh, men they have all the choices. It's not all men. It's a small fraction of men at the top, which, you know, tend to win out in you know, almost all games. And yeah, I think it's you know, it's kind of saying that men have a lot of options is, you know, kind of framing it a little bit. You know, it's a bit of an exaggeration.
He was just talking about himself then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Well, you're funny guys.
Excellent. Destroyed with your own facts and logic.
But sure. But if I push back on that, you know, there's a lot of women saying, you know, and quite understandably so, that, you know, that it's very difficult to meet a guy. It's very difficult to settle down with someone. There's a lot of women who hit their late 30s. Where are all the good men gone? You see it time and time again on social media. Does that not prove my point, or have I got it wrong?
No, I think there are many losers in the system. I'm not sure. There's probably more like really hardcore winners that are men overall in the system. I mean, it depends what you think winning is. If you want to, you know, build a sustainable harem and, you know, retire maybe at 50 with I don't know, a cohort of women at one point, that is winning for some people. But I think even for the men who, you know, get to go on all these dates and they you know, get to, you know, be the top guy, they probably at one point, you know, would want to, you know, have a more stable existence, maybe want to have offspring as well, you know, have a legacy, have more baby chads or whatever they imagine their legacy to be. So it is hard even for them, because the problem is if this system essentially is feeding off the insecurities of women, because they don't get to have the relationships they want. They don't get to go on, you know, on the dates with someone who wants to date them for, you know, a long-term relationship. You know, the women on the apps at one point, they you know, have some issues. Like, it's, you know, it really does mess up your, I don't know, your self-esteem in a way when you really, you know, you can go on many dates. That's no problem. People will date you. But if the guy you want to date doesn't want to be in a relationship with you, it does kind of scar you mentally. And especially if, for example, 10 years ago, you were, I know, in college and you met some guy at a party and, 2 weeks later he was your boyfriend. This doesn't happen anymore. Now you have, a very contractual type of relationship. And then maybe after 2 months, they're like, oh, should we be exclusive? And layers upon layers of commitment that didn't used to exist in the past. It does kind of leave you a little bit like, okay, it's very hard to get to that level of commitment, even to be someone's girlfriend. And this is kind of a change that happened, felt to me quite suddenly, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. The standard shifted from you meet someone in real life and, things are a bit not traditional, but you get to have a boyfriend at one point, to you kind of get to interact with the algorithm and the algorithm will serve you whoever it wants. And then you kind of have to go through this very contractual, stressful situation. But yeah, I think the women are losing out here. Obviously, they're not getting what they want. The men at the bottom, forget about it. Yeah, they're not. They should just delete the apps. And some men are having a really good time. That's what I could say for a while.
So we sort of diagnosed the problem in that, if I can sum it up succinctly, we've got too much of the wrong kind of freedom, which has resulted in all of this. So, to put it very clearly, so there'll be people watching this going, so what are you saying? You're saying women should be back in the kitchen. That's how you get back to the way that things ought to be?
It's a really tough one, because obviously once you've lifted the lid on freedom, it's quite nice. It's an enticing proposition. You don't want to put the lid back on. I do think that women would be best served, and I think men as well, to understand these dynamics, to understand that, these apps are not matchmaking apps, to understand the nature of the two markets that are clashing there, the market for long-term relationships and the market for sex, and that not all dating is dating. And I also wish that women, if they were more, relationship oriented, to make that clear. And to understand that, most men probably will not want to date you, or some kind of guys that you might find attractive will reject you if you state that you want a long-term relationship, or even, God forbid, that you want to get married or have children or something. There are very subtle ways to phrase this. You don't need to be very crazy explicit, but if you, for example, try to paint a picture of the life that you'd like to lead with, in the future, and maybe include that you want to have children or something like that. You can do that in a tactful way, and then maybe attract the type of people that are interested in that and share your values. But just using the apps on their own terms is a soul grinder. I do not recommend it. So you can use the apps, but you should kind of understand what you're getting yourself into. And the more people understand about these dynamics in general, the more they can maybe cultivate more of the Aristotelian type of freedom, where they kind of understand that the world has constraints, and that it's probably wise for them to set constraints on themselves to be able to navigate the world. Because if you're just going whole hog on the live and let live thing, bad things might happen. Just saying, from experience, but also from what I've seen around me.
And Alex, how much responsibility do you think feminism needs to take for this issue? Because feminism, at the start, very, very positive, but where we are now, you can be anything, you can do anything you want, blah 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 blah, and we are where we are now.
Yeah, I think feminism, this third, fourth wave feminism, is essentially an outgrowth out of that same idea of, okay, you are the homunculus behind the eyes, pulling the strings, being super rational, making decisions. You're not tied to your biology. You shouldn't be tied by tradition or any sort of constraint. I understand the impulse. It's the idea that you want to be free. That's great. But as I said, you've thrown out the baby with the bathwater here, and it was a pretty precious baby, and it was also a baby that coordinated everyone, and you can see a lot of consequences of this move towards kind of 100% individualism, and the idea that we don't really see. Marriage rates are plummeting, fertility rates are plummeting across the West, or across, kind of places that adopted this vision of the individual. So to me, feminism is just one flavor of the same philosophy that says, okay, the body, society, whatever is outside of this almost metaphysical nucleus that makes the decisions, is an imposition. I don't need. You can dispense with that.
And you actually studied gender studies?
Yeah, I have a degree. My undergrad was in economics, but it was in diversity management, gender and diversity management. So it's kind of gender studies in a business suit. It had a bit of a economics flair to it. But it was essentially just nonstop Judith Butler and a lot of scientific papers, and it was quite a hard exam to pass. I was very surprised because I thought it was going to be something easy because it sounded a bit fluffy. No, they really wanted to keep up the appearance that this is science, and they essentially made us learn social science papers by heart, and then know everything from the abstract to the coda to who participated, study design, and all sorts of things. Of course, after the replication crisis, probably about 97% of those papers that I learned for college were scrapped. But it's that's what they're trying to do, to sell the science in it.
Were you quite bought into it at the time? You weren't there to sort of study with a critical eye. You thought this was going to be valuable to you.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting field. I was kind of interested in feminism since I was a teenager, because growing up in Romania, being kind of this a bit of an outsider girl, interested in a lot of kooky things. I was kind of a militant atheist, and atheism at that point, like new atheism online, kind of started to get a bit social justicey. I don't know if anyone remembers Atheism Plus and things like that. So I kind of was like, oh, this is interesting, and that was kind of when I was in college as well. So I was like, oh, okay, this is an up and coming field. They were selling it to me hard. It sounded like it's going to be an easy exam. I was mistaken. So, a confluence of factors led me to have that as my undergraduate degree. Also, a lot of confusion in college. I had no idea what I was doing. I got into like economics uni, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Now I'm in the West. I'm learning Western science stuff. This is good. This is status enhancing, and it's going to be great for me if I finish this uni. But yeah, I was completely rudderless. So, feminism came to embrace me in its warm, comforting embrace.
And you talk about you're a militant atheist. Where are you now on that? Because to me, a lot of what we have now in the West, with our crises, with our refusal to settle down, is tied to a lack of religion. Are you still a militant atheist, or have you gone somewhere different with your thinking?
Yeah, I'm a lapsed militant atheist. I definitely not militant. Definitely not an atheist. I wouldn't say I'm extremely religious, but I am kind of returned to the Catholicism that I rejected. It's a journey. I mean, after you've been marinating in the four horsemen for 10 years, it's you kind of have to kind of make yourself available to the metaphysical in a very forceful way, because I've kind of marinated in these arguments for a long time, but I am much more connected to the world of the spiritual, and I think it's less so that I've read a book in Catholicism and I was like, wow, I'm struck by the truth of the Word of God. It was more that I've started to doubt rationality. I kind of started to doubt, because essentially what new atheism it kind of has a religious component. It's essentially the cult of the homunculus, the rational individual behind the eyes, making all the decisions, going ahead, doing, kicking ass, taking names, all that stuff. And I started to doubt that figure or that entity as being, as good as I thought it was, or at least being the measure of all things and enough to rule the world through. And then, I've kind of become a bit more interested in tradition. I've tried on to see what it feels like to not have to I don't know, reinvent the wheel every time, got married and now I'm going to have a baby, all sorts of, weird old school stuff that people used to do back in the day. And it feels really nice, I have to say. So in a way, kind of, I'm just, riding blind through this whole, kind of almost traditional lifestyle, pickling and making bread and doing all sorts of old school stuff. And it's pretty nice. I don't know. I'm probably not doing it correctly, or I'm LARPing or whatever, but the closer I got to the lifestyle of my ancestors, in a way, like my grandma used to live, the calmer and better I feel. So I don't know. I'm just empirically testing this day by day.
Well, that's one of the things I found quite interesting about your personal story, because I think I would include myself in this. A lot of people go through the sort of 20s, early 30s period of their life, and they're doing things that aren't making them happy, but they don't necessarily know what they're supposed to be doing. And in the modern society, they're being sold a whole bunch of narratives about what they should be doing and what should make them happy. And quite a lot of those things they then find out don't make them happy, aren't contributing to a better life or a better future. But you had, whether, I don't know, is it the presence of mind or whatever it might be, to go, actually, this is not good. This isn't working for me. And maybe I should try my grandma's lifestyle. Like, how did you know that you actually need to change up?
Yeah, I think it was, empirical experiment. I realized at one point that I was completely incapable of making good decisions about what would make me happy. It was just like almost completely the opposite of what I thought was gonna do it. It was good to go the other way. In my case, I don't know, I was a bit disillusioned by what I was seeing around me. And yeah, I said, okay, there is a reason for tradition. And, putting on my economist hat, I just realized that, tradition is a heuristic. It's, it's what people do because it works, because it's been robust throughout time. And, things like, I don't know, just working with your hands or having a garden or things like that are just, I don't know, sound like what old people do to my generation. It's very hard to describe, but it's, they fulfill a need in me that is, it's hard to, if I had to put all my needs in a spreadsheet, I would not necessarily know how to describe it in words or, to assign weights or values to it. But it does something, and, also pregnancy. Like when I was younger, I couldn't even conceive of the idea of having children. It seemed absolutely clear to me that I would never have children. It's absurd. I don't like babies, whatever. But now, going through this process, it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't have until it's there. And yeah, I think that's probably the issue with people being able to predict what's going to make them happy. You really don't know until it happens, and then until you make a commitment to something as well. I think that's also an important dimension, because like I said, a lot of modern living is about optionality. It's about increasing how many options you have. Okay, what can I consume today? What's going to be status enhancing for me? What am I getting out of this? But a lot of the interesting things in life, a lot of the things that are hard to put into words, happen when you give up on options, when you commit to something, when you commit to, to doing this show, to having a family, to building something more long-term with someone, to a friendship or something like that. So I feel like we tend to optimize for the things that we feel, at an expedient level are going to make us happy, which anything from sweets to, I don't know, impulsive sexual encounters are gonna fit the bill, but it's very hard to predict the longer term stuff.
And Alex, do you think a large part of this was brought on by COVID? Because I'll tell you from my experience. So when I was doing comedy, I was gigging 6 nights a week. I was gigging in, the best clubs, and it took me a long time to get to that point. I thought I was happy. I thought this is what I wanted to do. Then overnight, life literally stopped like that. And then you're left.
With me.
Exactly. and And what you actually realize is that you've been dedicating your life to a career, but the reality is that isn't fulfilling. It's nebulous. It's something, it doesn't anchor you like a family, a relationship, etc., etc. Was that part of the process for you?
I think I was definitely on the path before COVID, but it has cemented it much, much more because, for example, I mean, I was engaged before COVID, and we got married during COVID in one of these ridiculous ceremonies, but and we wanted to have a child before that, and I was kind of, I was pickling before COVID, I have to say, but it did really, it strengthened my relationship a lot, to be in a bunker with someone for what is it now, 14 months, and to feel like, you still kind of like them is quite cool.
So there's a reassuring vote of confidence for your husband there. You still kind of like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's okay. he still kind of likes me, it seems. Yeah. So yeah, we're tolerating each other well. And I've moved back to Romania, where we live in kind of a duplex thing with my mom's my neighbor, and I see her every day, and we've had quite a rocky relationship, but it's really improved things, and I don't know, it's kind of refocused me a little bit on the, as I said, the longer term stuff, the stuff that I have more skin in the game in, like family and and in a way it's also given me a lot of freedom, like the podcast and coming on to shows like this. It's quite cool. I'd never thought I'd be in the situation where people would ask me to respond to questions. It's fun. So yeah, it's been a transformative time. Obviously, it's not been great in many other respects. It's been rocky, but I think for me and a lot of people, I know so many people who are pregnant now who are just decided to have COVID babies, and the media says, oh no, it's a sink, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to believe my lying eyes to think that there's quite a few COVID babies popping up. So. I think it's been a mixed blessing for sure.
Do you want to promote your business to an intelligent audience who don't need to know your pronouns to buy your product?
Here at Trigonometry, we have over 250,000 subscribers across the different platforms, and we frequently get over 3 million views a month. That's a lot of new customers for your business.
We speak with some of the biggest guests from the worlds of politics, economics, journalism, arts and entertainment. All of them have spent at least 1 month in the gulag, so you don't have to.
And we'll match your product to the perfect guest for you. American sponsors will be matched with American guests, and so on. That way, your advert has the best possible chance of getting to the right people.
Or as we call them, the wrong people.
Advertise with us and we'll get your business cancelled or your money back.
Contact us by email at marketing@triggerpod.co.uk and we'll make your nightmares come true. Do you think as well that, and I don't know, that because you grew up in a Catholic country, Romania's Catholic. My mother's
Orthodox.
Orthodox. My apologies.
But my family's Catholic. Parentheses.
Your family is Catholic. Do you think part of the problem we see in the West is we don't talk about death? Death is a taboo subject. We don't mention it. We don't talk about it, and therefore we live these lives as if we believe that it's gonna go on forever.
Yeah, the denial of death is really strong in the West. I think it's mostly because you don't get confronted by death so much. Modern medicine, really did pretty good job with averting childhood mortality and things like that, which were rampant, or deaths from infection and things like that. So you really don't get to see people dying as much. You don't have as many family members as you used to, so just like statistical chance of people dying around you is lower because there's just fewer people. And I think it's also the way we, because we've gotten rid of rituals, you don't really make a big fuss when people die as much as well. You put them in the box, you have a day and that's it. Cremation also, it's just kind of like the self-cleaning oven of getting rid of people. It's, it's not, we don't really integrate this into our rituals. I mean, what rituals? If you're not extremely religious, probably don't even have a ritual related to death. And The stories around death are just, typically you see them on TV and they're just statistics, or you hear that someone died. Oh my God, that's incredible. Like it's some cosmic occurrence, while, the truth is that people die every day, and, you're going to die. And it's, this memento mori aspect of life is not highlighted at all. And I mean, I can understand why it's unpleasant, and we want a pleasant life with pleasant, things to watch, and have a comfortable everything. But I think it's really valuable for people to be confronted with death. And to be honest, you see this with COVID, like how fast the narrative flipped from, I don't know, we need to protect the NHS to we need to conquer death, which is just absurd. And I think maybe 100 years ago, people would have known it's absurd. They'd be like, yeah, this is not the way you mitigate this type of event, because, people will die. The idea that, even if you save someone who's, what's the main cohort for COVID, 80 years old, you save their last 2 years. That's, I don't know exactly what type of economy that is, but it doesn't work like that.
And what's interesting there as well is we're really trying to we were trying to prevent deaths happening on television. That's what's really happened, right? Because we've gone after protecting that cohort, which is very reported, and completely ignored. And there's quite a lot of evidence that our government hasn't even looked at the negative impacts ahead of time of, cancer, heart disease, all of that stuff, because they're not happening on television. And it's that sort of showy aspect of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a showy aspect. And it's also what, if you're a state, you're going to optimize stuff that's visible to you as a state, things that are legible, and things that people care about in the moment that will lead to political pressure. So what people care about in the moment is case rates, which is a random number, very much dependent on how many, tests are made. Death rates, that's interesting. And also what's very important is anecdotal evidence in video form. That's what leads politics at the moment. If you see someone, a crying nurse, or a desperate Italian physician, or a corpse being swept up by strange, apparatchiks in Wuhan, then that's going to be very important in terms of how much heft it has in the direction of politics. So in a way, all the negative space behind this, like you said, cancer deaths, or people who don't even get treated or even diagnosed, doesn't even exist, because it's hard to narrativize. There are no videos of cancer deaths. It's going to be very hard to get empathy out of that.
Let me ask you something, just changing subject a little bit. We've got about 15 minutes left. We're talking a lot of the things that have come as a result of what you might describe as liberalism. Where have the forces of conservatism been? Because you would think, the dissolution of rituals, the endless freedom to do whatever you want, all of those things historically have been held in check by people who are a little bit more socially conservative, who say, well, maybe you should, have a relationship before you have sex, or maybe, there's some things that you just do. Like if a grandma dies, you go to the funeral, and you're supposed to have a funeral with the whole family there. Like all of these things that are gradually evaporating. Like, what have conservatives been doing? How, what have they conserved?
Not much. I mean, the conservatives are, what was it, like liberals, progressives driving the speed limit. That's essentially been the truth about most conservative movements in the press. I mean, obviously there are some conservative intellectuals like Roger Scruton or people like that who represent a different tradition. But the mainstream of conservatism has just, tracked the liberals or labor by maybe 5 or 10 years in terms of social values. They're always on the back foot. The thing is, in the kind of the secular liberal consensus, the egalitarian assumption, there's not really that much of an argument to be made that, you shouldn't live and let live. You shouldn't expand freedoms. You shouldn't expand, welfare and things like that, because you need a safety net. What they've been really good at is making space for the market. To create, to try to, reduce taxes. I'm all for it, create more freedom in the market, reduce regulation, all this type of stuff, which has been kind of the main kind of libertarian wing of especially US conservatism. The UK has a different flavor, but that's kind of the main idea, is that, you need to liberalize the markets, and that's, through some magic, through libertarian economics, things will fall into place, and people will just, I don't know, be socially conservative for one reason or another. But the problem with that is that, for example, if you have completely globally liberalized markets, that's a bit of a solvent to socially conservative ideas as well. Like, for example, if you, for example, you can't get a job in your hometown because, most of the jobs have been exported to China because it's a cheaper market to produce in, or, the liberal market of labor demands that you leave the place where you are to find the perfect job for you somewhere else. Or did you go to college to get the skills that you need to climb up in the hierarchy? All this stuff is a solvent to if you can't be socially conservative if you don't respect the fact that people may want to live in a certain locality, may want to, I don't know, have a more legacy style job, or be home to take care of their children. Because the liberal market wants people to produce. So women being in the marketplace, working full time, is a big aspect of libertarian economics as well. And, people want to increase their labor force participation. So there's all of these things that are geared towards the market. And if something's geared specifically towards increasing productivity, GDP, whatever type of measure you want to bring in, it's obviously not geared towards protecting the things that are not the market, which many times consist of these more traditional institutions, which, kind of are left by the wayside. So I think, in a way, conservatives have, with all good intentions, they've shot themselves in the foot on social issues with this strategy, because you need to have a priority. If social conservatism is your priority, well, then that is a value that's higher than the market. And it has never been higher than the market in the last, 50 years.
And isn't it the problem as well that, all these values that you talk about, which you associate with social conservatism, you can't monetize them. And in a consumerist society, they therefore get ranked down in the pecking order.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's the value of taking care of a sick relative? Who's going to pay you for that? If you can't get Jeff Bezos to pay you to do that on from as a 9 to 5, then is it even happen? Did it even make a sound? So yeah, like you said, if it's not reflected in the main ladder of value that we have, then it doesn't exist. It's valueless. Therefore, it will disappear eventually.
So what's the answer, Alex? What's a political position that you think is healthy as a response to all of the things we've been talking about for the last 50 minutes?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. A lot of people have a lot of ideas of how to do this. It's a hard one because what we're living on in the West is kind of the scaffolding of kind of this Judeo-Christian value system, and it still works. It's got some holes, but there are some core values that exist there, even though we pretend that they don't exist and we're eroding them with every step. I don't think you can have a political system that doesn't have a value system behind it. Where that value system needs to grow out of, there's schools like, Catholic integralism, where you kind of have, Catholicism as that value system, which, we used to have in Europe, in its heyday. There were good things about it, bad things about it. But at the same time, the idea that, okay, we're just going to have a valueless society and see how that goes. The problem with that is that it gets taken over by people who have values. And woke is a very strong moral system. And it's essentially come into a space that said, our value is that we have no values. Well, these guys have values, and they will come and trample yours to the ground because, don't tread on me. Cool. But how about this, this millenarian cult that wants to show you that you're fallen, and it has all the trappings of an old school hardcore cult, and it offers a really powerful vision and offers very powerful morality, and it will take your system over. So I don't exactly know what type of morality we need to instantiate in our political system, but I really don't think you can go without any. So I don't know, pure libertarianism, I think, just collapses because the game theory of it doesn't work. Something will come in to fill the void. And, now we know in a way we're all talking here because something has come in to fill the void and it's absolutely bonkers. So yeah, I don't know. It's but also on a personal level, because I think, politics is one level, but I think, people can live good lives in the current regime if they just kind of try to look at reality a little bit closer, like we were talking about. How do you want your life to be? Maybe look a bit back at tradition. It can be helpful. There are certain things that you don't know. Maybe defer to other people, or maybe to faith traditions or traditions in general in some directions. So, yeah, I don't know. A bit more humility at the personal level can be quite helpful.
Let me just ask one follow-up. See, the thing with that thinking, and I am increasingly convinced as well that the answer to this needs to start with the individual, where you live a life that actually works for you, as you seem to be doing, and pursuing a purpose and family and community and contributing and, challenging yourself and, cleaning your room and all that great stuff, right? But at the same time, you've got a baby on the way, and congratulations, by the way. That baby's going to be born 7 years from now. That baby's going to go to school where they're going to be taught that they don't have a gender and all of that other stuff.
I don't think that's going to be taught in Romania, mate. I'm going to be honest with you.
Maybe it's catching up.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Really?
Yeah,
right.
It's all downstream.
Yeah. So, but that's why I've always thought about it. That's why I've always made a stand against it, because it's going to spread, right? So, you've lived your perfect life. You've taught your child up until the age of 7, this is right, this is wrong, this is how you do this, is how you do that, this is how you think about this, don't have sex before then, whatever, all of that great stuff. And then they go to school and they clash with a completely different institutionalized culture, which is, as you said yourself, bonkers. Now, what do you do then? Because it's no longer about you, it's about your family.
Yeah. Believe me, I've thought about this from every angle.
Sorry, I don't want to put you off having the baby,
No.
by the way.
It's a bit late.
It's a bit too late. Yes, exactly.
You've made your bed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I've definitely thought about this, and I've written about it as well. It's a hard time, especially because my baby is going to be male. And he's going to be white.
You're going to bring a straight white male into the...
Oh.
How dare you? Let's cancel
we'll
you.
See.
Actually, we don't know if it's going to be straight yet.
Yeah.
Exactly. True. We don't even know if it's going to be male. We need to wait until its 18th birthday.
Yeah. That's when you do the gender reveal party. Ta-da!
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a hard thing. The issue is, no parent ever could, completely control the worldview of their child. My plan, my tactical toolkit is to provide a stable, calm, good-natured home. Hopefully, if I don't, change personalities overnight if I have a baby, but and also kind of just model a good life to the child. I feel like a lot of people, especially in my generation, have had parents that came from quite disorganized environments. Everyone talks about boomer parents and things like that, where children of divorce, people who are really in thrall with the with this idea of the individual, of constantly choosing maybe to divorce your spouse, or having affairs and then being quite a I don't know, trying to optimize yourself quite a bit too much if you try to build a stable family. So that's something I will try very hard not to do, and to provide a good background for the child. And he will have to deal with reality at one point. And in a way, I feel you can't do much better by your child than to just set the put the seeds right and set the background for him to grow and exist in a stable way. And also, I'm gonna let my husband teach him about being a man and all the manly things, and I'm not going to try to interfere with his skateboarding or whatever one should not do with boys. I think, I I'm kind of a pro-natalist. I think, it's good to have children. The world, I didn't expect the world to be the way it is now, and I probably can't make any prediction about how it's going to be in 5 years. I think technology really is a bit of a kerosene that exists in these cultural spaces, and I feel like, you can have things cascading one way or the other quite suddenly. So I'm just going to try to prepare him as much as I can, without trying to, fill his head with dogma or whatever, but also, trying to strengthen him for, whatever might come.
Alex, well, those are very, very powerful words to end the interview on. We always end our interviews with one final question, which is, what is the one thing we're not talking about as a society, but we really should be?
Yeah, I think one thing that people aren't talking about is migration and kind of migration of intelligence and kind of strip mining the world for very intelligent people, moving them to cities, and also kind of putting them in this issue that I just laid out at the beginning of the show, the idea that, it's not a good place to have children. So essentially, you're creating these fertility sinks in cities. Cities have always been fertility sinks, but now they've really made a machine out of it. And you're taking some of the most brilliant people from around the world and putting them there, and kind of not creating the conditions for this intelligence to perpetuate. And I think, intelligence is quite heritable, and it would be nice to have some left in a few generations. And I think this might be a bigger problem than people think. So, I mean, I haven't heard many people talk about this. I think it's a tough one, and I think, it's like kind of like antibiotic resistance. It's like, you don't deal with it until you have to. So I think we'll see a little bit of this on the horizon, maybe in 50 years.
Great, a generation of stupid people, something that we can all look forward to.
Yeah, idiocracy is proving to be quite prophetic.
It is. Alex, great chatting to you. Thank you for coming on the show. People can follow you on Twitter. They can read your, is it Substack you're mostly putting stuff out?
Yeah, that's where my writing is. And also my podcasts and
the Subversive podcast.
Yeah.
Make sure you check it out, and thank you for watching at home. We will see you very soon with another brilliant interview like this one.
And they always go out, as well as our raw shows at 7 p.m. UK time.
Well done, mate.
Thank you. I nailed it. Take care and see you soon, guys. We hope you've enjoyed this incredible interview. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell button so that you never miss another fantastic episode.
And if you believe that the work we do here at Trigonometry is important, support us by joining our locals community using the link below.